The galactic throne room of Ythukar Prime smelled of scorched citrus and ambition. Its high arches pulsed with bioorganic light, shifting between sickly lavender and gold. The floor, some shimmering metal that drank in sound, reflected the gathered royalty like a dark, quiet pool. And at the far end, perched on a throne fashioned from the fossilized bones of extinct planetary gods, lounged King Vorthax the 37th, supreme heir of the starborn dominion, devourer of civilizations, son of the Sundrinker. He was chewing something. It was purple, and it squelched loudly with every bite. His tongue, as long as a horsewhip, flicked lazily across his fangs. The assembled nobles tittered politely, their laughter like broken glass in a hurricane. Claire Monroe sat precisely 8 paces from the throne, back straight, legs crossed at the ankle, chin lifted in a posture that whispered neither defiance nor submission, just observation. She wore a fitted black suit with polished boots and no visible weapons. A single strand of hair fell loose from her bun, curling at her temple like punctuation. On her lap rested a steaming porcelain teacup. The scent of bergamot and honey drifted like incense across the hush. "You bring leaf water to an imperial negotiation," drawled a noble to her left, a lizard-faced diplomat with 12 jeweled rings, but no eyes. "Charming. Next you'll be offering folk songs and hope." Claire smiled as if she hadn't heard. Then she said softly, "Only if the room feels dull." The insult hovered a beat too long. Someone stifled a laugh. Someone else hissed. Vorthax didn't laugh. He studied her, a bored predator wondering if the mouse might bite. Then he stood, 10 feet of muscle and chitin, crowned with flame-plated horns and clad in a robe that rustled like dry leaves. He descended the bone steps with theatrical slowness, his footfalls cracking the silence. The air trembled with gravity surge pheromones, meant to trigger awe or submission in lesser species. Claire didn't flinch. The king stopped 2 paces in front of her, close enough that she could see the mottled veins pulsing beneath the scales. His breath smelled of rust and burnt sugar. "We do not tolerate mockery, human," he growled. "You sit here as a guest, not an equal. Speak again, and I shall remove your tongue for sport." She lifted the cup to her lips, sipped, placed it gently back on the saucer. Understood. The whisper was smooth, measured, devoid of emotion. And that's what made him angrier. Without warning, Vorthax lunged forward, and with a roar that shattered a nearby pillar, he kicked her. The sound was obscene, flesh meeting raw kinetic power. Claire flew backward in a sickening arc, tea and porcelain shattered mid-air like glass stars. She hit the obsidian wall with a thud that echoed through the chamber. A breathless moment passed. The nobles leaned forward. She didn't move. Then, slowly, mechanically, she pushed herself upright. Her hands were steady. She dusted off her lap, adjusted the sleeve of her jacket, and ran her fingers through her hair. Her nose bled. Her expression didn't change. She looked at the broken teacup on the floor as though cataloging a museum artifact. Then she turned to face the throne, raised her eyes to Vorthax, and said, with clinical softness, 2 hours then. Silence devoured the chamber. No one understood what she meant. Not yet. Then Claire bowed. Not deeply, not subserviently, just enough to make it feel ancient, like she was honoring a ritual older than vengeance. And she turned her back on the king. The guards didn't stop her. Vorthax did not call after her. Something in the room had changed, though no one could name it. The air grew colder. The doors whispered open for her. She passed under their ancient engravings, depictions of worlds conquered, slaves shackled, human silhouettes impaled on alien pikes. The same doors had closed behind hundreds of defeated delegates before her. She was the first to leave upright. Once in the corridor, Claire inhaled. Slowly. Her ribs protested, but pain was just feedback. A reminder. She blinked the blood from her lashes and opened her wristwatch. 1 hour. 59 minutes. The digital screen blinked. Phase 0, echo confirmed. She walked through the palace corridors with measured calm, taking in the murals and pillars, the shimmering plasma sculptures, and whispering servant bots. Everything screamed wealth and conquest. And yet, it all looked terribly temporary. In a distant courtyard, two alien children were flying. Literally, hover discs affixed to their backs. They soared above a fountain of singing stones. One spotted Claire and stuck his tongue out. She smiled back. Kindly. Motherly almost. Lovely weather, she said to no one in particular. A nearby guard frowned. His species had ears that rotated like radar dishes. She passed through a garden where the roses sang operatic arias in six-part harmony. Beyond that, the corridor forked into three paths. Claire took the left one. Her steps made no sound now, not because the floors were soft, but because Earth had already mapped and silenced the acoustics. The throne room behind her returned to life. Laughter. Confusion. One diplomat asked, "Is she Earth's best?" That's all they sent. Another chuckled. No soldiers? No demands? Just a librarian with a death wish. The king grunted. She is nothing. An insect in a suit. They send tea to a battlefield. It's an insult. Earth should be. He stopped mid-sentence. Something itched in his memory. Something off. He turned to the seer, the blind one who never spoke unless invited. "What did you see?" the king asked. The seer's mouth twitched. "I saw," he whispered, "the woman taste the floor and leave a scent behind." That meant nothing to most. But the old ones knew. In some species, that was a hunt sign. A ritual. Back in the East Wing, Claire stepped onto a glass platform and watched the stars beyond the palace dome. Her eyes traced constellations, but her mind counted seconds. The last time someone had kicked her in a political chamber, 3 moons vanished from the galactic map. A shadow loomed beside her. The servant, slim, shaking, holding a tray of fruit. "They laughed," he said. "You should leave." Claire turned her head slightly. "They always laugh," she said. "It helps them die unafraid." He stared at her. Her eye color shifted just slightly. Blue to silver. "What happens in 2 hours?" he asked. She reached out, picked up a purple fruit, examined it. "Do you know what happens," she said, "when Earth truly responds to a crime?" He shook his head. She bit the fruit, swallowed, then smiled. "Neither do they." The servant fled, or tried to. Claire leaned against the glass railing, sipping a new cup of tea, courtesy of her jacket's inner dispenser. Earth packed smart. Behind her, the security system registered no alerts. Because the threat wasn't there. It had already been here, for 3 years. The throne room lights flickered, just for a second. No one noticed. But Claire did, and the palace AI whispered in a voice only she could hear. Countdown initiated. She sipped again. She never liked rushing things. After all, it was still only 1 hour and 47 minutes. And she always gave kings the dignity of 2 full hours before erasing their line from existence. She looked back toward the palace, toward the throne, toward the place where a king had kicked a human for sipping tea. She whispered, to no one, yet to everyone, "You really shouldn't have done that." Then she smiled, not kindly, not cruelly, just knowingly. And the stars behind her kept watching. The royal feast commenced with a trumpet made of living bone, its blare a mixture of thunder and scream. In the opaline banquet hall of Ythukar Prime, the alien elite gathered under chandeliers pulsing with bioluminescent parasites, their laughter echoing off curved walls engraved with centuries of conquest. King Vorthax, resplendent in molten gold ceremonial scales, sat with his brood clustered around him like tumors, sons, daughters, consorts, and cousins all bred for supremacy and brutality. Their tongues flicked and twitched as they devoured meat that shimmered blue and oozed sap. The scent was cloying, sweet like syrup poured over rot. Claire Monroe stood beside a column, quietly ignored, a diplomatic shadow the room pretended not to see. Her suit was freshly pressed, her lip freshly split. The king's kick still echoed through her ribs, a dull throb synced to her heartbeat. But her spine remained straight. Her hands remained still. A server approached with a tray of chalices. Claire took one without thanks, then raised it to her lips and sniffed. Vinegar and venom. She smiled just a little and placed it back without drinking. "You should return to your ship," said a voice to her right. a woman with seafoam skin and 7 jewel-crusted arms. Before your bones, match the decor. Claire tilted her head. You assume this is the only set I brought. The noble's nostrils flared, but Claire had already turned her attention elsewhere. She was cataloging the exits, watching the flicker of force fields over windows, counting the guards, and studying the way the youngest of Vorthax's sons tapped his talon on the table every time he lied. They didn't notice her watching. They never did. At the far end of the hall, Lord Kieran, a reptilian ambassador known for his cruelty toward planetary refugees, raised a goblet. To Earth, he announced, whose representatives prove that even prey can be amusing. Scattered laughter followed, loudest from those seated closest to the king. Vorthax grinned wide, revealing bone-plated fangs. His voice boomed like falling stone. Let her return to her dirtball planet. Let her tell her people they were dismissed with civility, before we send the fleet to collect Earth's oceans and chain their children. Claire looked up slowly, eyes locking with the king's. I will be sure to do that, she said, though we don't usually take threats seriously from species who still burn their dead for power. The laughter stopped. It wasn't what she said. It was how she said it. Casual, measured, and entirely unfazed. Somewhere, a fork clattered to the floor. Vorthax leaned forward. You continue to speak, despite the warning. Claire turned to the table, leaned down slightly, and picked up the fallen fork. She held it out to a stunned servant. There's something you're not quite grasping, she said gently. I'm not here to negotiate. I'm here to observe. She placed the fork in the servant's trembling hands, and to confirm alignment before consequences unfold. The room buzzed, not with noise, but with unease. You speak as if Earth hold power, Vorthax sneered. You are but one woman. No ships. No guards. No weapons. Claire smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. That's how you know it's already too late. Behind her, the chandeliers flickered once, briefly, almost imperceptibly. To the aliens, it was a glitch. To Claire, it was the signal she'd been waiting for. 1 hour remained. Do you know what I love about tea? She asked suddenly, directing the question at no one in particular. It teaches patience. You don't drink it during the boil. You let it steep. Let it become itself. The king's eldest son rose, tall and scarred from years of arena combat. He approached her slowly, eyes narrow, weaponless, but dangerous. The room quieted further. Speak again, he warned, and I'll steep you in your own blood. Claire raised a brow. Poetry. The prince stepped closer, until they stood nearly chest to chest. You do not belong in this room, he whispered. Claire's gaze dropped briefly, to the spot just above his heart. No, she agreed. Not as a guest. She stepped back, hands behind her back, every movement calm and measured. But don't worry. I won't be here much longer. The prince snorted. Good. Claire turned away and began walking the edge of the banquet, passing alien nobles who stared as if she were a specter. Her steps were quiet. The hem of her coat whispered against the floor like a threat spoken under breath. She stopped by a holographic sculpture, a recreation of Ythukker's first planetary slaughter, a spinning cube of horror frozen in light. You ever notice, she murmured to a nearby servant, how civilizations that celebrate massacres usually forget how they end? The servant, a six-eyed, rodent-like creature, blinked. What do you mean? Claire checked her watch. Just take an early break tonight. She moved on. Meanwhile, in a sealed chamber beneath the palace, something woke. 2 miles beneath the surface, locked in the molten archives of the throne world, Earth's buried device stirred for the first time in 3 years. It had arrived inside a ceremonial crate of gifted minerals during a lesser treaty, and had quietly rooted itself into the planet's data veins ever since. Its name was Vesper. It had no voice, only intent, and Earth had taught it patience. In the banquet hall, a whisper moved like a ripple. The seer had spoken. The seer was a fossilized monk bred to silence, his face folded in permanent contemplation. He hadn't uttered a word in 4 generations. But now he raised a claw and said, "She walks with stillness. That means her sky is full." Gasps followed. Even Vorthax leaned back. "She is no soldier," the seer continued, voice rasping like sand dragged across stone. "But she is followed by those who do not bleed." The room grew cold. Claire had stopped walking. She turned her head slightly and smiled at the seer. "Wise one," she said, "you see more than most." The king rose abruptly. "Enough of this theater. She leaves tonight." Claire inclined her head. "As scheduled." She stepped backward, approaching the exit, never turning her back on the table. "I want her scanned," Vorthax barked. Her ship seized. "I want answers." Claire stepped into the doorway and turned her eyes on him one last time. "You already have all the answers," she said. "You just weren't ready to hear the questions." With that, she was gone, and the doors sealed behind her like the closing of a tomb. Outside, the hall seemed darker now. The walls breathed slower. The palace AI began rerouting systems inexplicably. Claire walked with steady purpose, her wristwatch blinking silently. Phase 1, 41 minutes and 7 seconds. She entered a quiet corridor. At the end waited a janitor bot. When it saw her, it spun in a circle twice and beeped once. Earth's code for all systems infiltrated. Claire patted its dome gently. "Thanks, buddy." Then she opened a side panel in the wall, entered a maintenance code, and stepped into a chamber that didn't exist on any map. Inside, she removed her gloves. Her fingers bore embedded filaments, one red, one gold. She pressed them to the wall and whispered, "Confirm vessel uplink. Prepare exfiltration window." A soft pulse answered her. And then faintly, so faintly it could have been imagined, the palace lights dimmed. The royal family feasted. The nobles drank. But the silence behind their laughter grew thicker. Somewhere in their bones, they felt it. The warning had not come in the form of an army. It had come dressed in diplomacy, and Earth had spoken it in the soft language of tea, patience, and politely timed vengeance. Claire checked her watch again, and smiled, because now only 39 minutes remained. And that was all the time the palace had left to pretend they were still in control. The scent of spice-roasted marrow and fermented algae still clung to the palace's corridors, but beneath it, deep, subtle, deliberate, another smell was rising. Ionized air, lubricated carbon, and heatless, silent anticipation. Claire Monroe walked those halls without urgency, like a guest meandering after dessert. Her posture was unchanged, her hair still pinned, her boots clicking lightly on marble that had once been quarried from a moon destroyed in ceremony. Behind her, unseen by any organic eye, Earth's contingency stirred like breath drawn inward before the scream. She turned into a narrow corridor, lit only by hovering orbs of whisper light, their glow dimming slightly as she passed. Not by malfunction, by choice. The palace's AI had already stopped asking questions. A janitor bot scuttled by, then stopped mid-sweep. Claire reached down, pressed a fingertip to its sensor plate, and said, "Confirm trigger path." The bot blinked once in green, twice in blue, then resumed sweeping as though nothing had happened. From a distance, she looked harmless. That was the point. In the royal council chamber, King Vorthax sat on his throne like an idling war machine. His family fanned out around him, sons and daughters draped in velvet and armor, cousins from outer colonies sipping translucent wine, advisors in crystalline robes murmuring calculations. None of them laughed now. The mood had shifted. The seer, always still, twitched. "She left scent trails in the logic grid," he rasped. "Thought where no thought should be." "Explain," Vorthax snapped. The seer raised a trembling finger. "She didn't bring a ship. She was the ship." Murmurs rippled across the room. "What do you mean?" asked Prince Alvar, the king's second heir and commander of orbital forces. "She is not alone," said the seer. "She never was." In a forgotten wing of the palace, Claire opened a service door that led into a sublevel used only by kitchen drones and waste shuttles. Her watch beeped twice. 12 minutes and 43 seconds remaining. She entered. The hallway darkened behind her. One by one, the walls of Ythukker's most sacred place had been peeled open. Not with weapons, with access. 3 years ago, Earth had sent a gift, a statue made of pea stone, a fabricated mineral encoded with nanolattice intelligence. Inside that statue was the first crawler, a silent observer that unpacked itself cell by cell, spreading into the palace unnoticed, teaching itself the shape of the corridors, the patterns of the locks, the rhythms of the guard's breath. It wasn't fast. It was patient. Like Claire, the hall curved downward into shadow. She moved like water over polished stone, eyes tracking the flicker of motion from ceiling pipes. Small things moved with her, things invisible to the eye, but audible to the right frequencies. Earth's watchers. Earth's whispers. She stopped at a panel marked Royal Archive Access, genetic level only. She placed her hand against it. A long pause. Then, in a voice almost reluctant, the system asked, "Identify authority." Claire whispered a name. Not hers. The name of a royal whose blood had been harvested during an innocent diplomatic toast 5 years ago. One drop caught on a napkin, analyzed, and replicated through crisp PR echoes. Confirmed. The door slid open. Inside was a chamber built for bloodlines, ceiling-to-floor displays of every decree, war ledger, and state secret of the Starborn Dominion. She walked to the center console, placed her palm down, whispered again, "Vesper." The air thickened, and from somewhere deep beneath the planet's crust, something answered. Claire's voice was low. "Execute cradle lock. Isolate royal DNA codes. Begin tether severance." 1,000 lines of red code spilled across the glass. In the throne room above, 2 of the king's daughters screamed and collapsed, bleeding from the eyes. "What is this?" the king roared. The seer murmured, "She has triggered the unmaking. Your house will bleed backwards." Alarms began to warble. Not loud ones, but old tones. Forgotten systems. Emergency subroutines no one had used in centuries. On the orbital station, one of the primary defense platforms rotated without command, aligning its weaponry inward. Claire watched the data pour in. Her voice remained calm, instructional. "Back up your minds if you want. They'll only live 5 seconds longer." Vesper pulsed in reply. Confirmation, royal cradle severance complete. She stepped back, then spoke into her wrist. "Time." A single voice, Earth AI, neutral and patient, answered. 10 minutes. "Shall I proceed?" Claire looked up at the carved ceiling above her, at a fresco of the king trampling the skulls of 10 worlds. "Yes," she said. "Let's show them what one human in a suit can do." The AI responded not with words, but with action. Across the palace, screens turned black, then white, then a single sentence in all known galactic languages. "You were warned politely." A moment later, the doors of the royal feast hall sealed. Panic erupted. Guards ran to control panels, dead. Weapons activated, then disarmed themselves. The chandeliers flickered again, then fell. Each noble tried a different way out. None worked. The gravity shifted subtly, pinning them gently to the floor. Not enough to kill. Just enough to remove their pride. Claire stepped back into the main corridor. She walked through halls, now humming with sound, of plasma chambers discharging, of drones unfolding, of locks unlatching not with clanks, but with sighs. Earth didn't kick in doors. It opened them like a librarian shelving a final book. She passed 2 palace staff cowering behind a statue. One looked up, weeping. "Why are you doing this?" Claire paused. "We asked for respect," she said. "You gave us bruises." She looked at her wrist. 3 minutes and 28 seconds. A turn of the corridor brought her to the main lift. It had been deactivated, but Earth didn't need permission. It opened. Inside stood 3 humans, all dressed like her. One carried a violin case. One held a folded apron. The third had nothing at all, just a ring on her finger and fire behind her eyes. Claire smiled. "You're early." The violin case opened. Inside was not an instrument. Inside was Earth's reply. The leader, a man with inked temples and a soft voice, asked, "Final sequence?" Claire nodded. "Royal blood. Clean." He raised the device, thumbed a small switch. Above them, in the throne room, the floor began to warm. The king roared for his guards. None came. They were gone, some asleep, some gagged, some watching from afar, weeping into their palms. Prince Alvar threw himself at the sealed door, screaming. Then, on every surface, every screen, Claire appeared. Standing calmly. Alone. She spoke once. Contingency protocol complete. You may submit now. Or wait to be removed. Silence. And then a whisper from the seer. She is not vengeance. She is correction. The king, shaking with fury, slammed his fist against his throne. This is an act of war. Claire's voice returned. Not angry. Not triumphant. Soft. King Vorthax, she said, 2 hours ago, you kicked a human. We considered that an act of peace ended. The throne room lights went out. The door opened, and Claire stepped through. Alone. No army. No weapons visible. Just a woman in a black suit, with a tired expression and a single word left on her lips. Hello again. And from the corridor, behind her, came the sound of the Earth contingency, finally breathing in. There were no more warnings now. Just resolution. The throne room was no longer a place of power. It was a cage made of history and arrogance, a monument to a dynasty that had mistaken centuries of dominance for immunity. Smoke drifted lazily across the fractured marble floor, where shards of ancestral relics lay among overturned goblets and shattered opaline glass. The great seal of Ythukar, once gleaming from the ceiling dome, hung cracked and dimmed, flickering like the dying eye of a god. Claire Monroe stepped through the main doors without ceremony. She walked slowly, her boots silent on the scorched carpet that still bore the blood of Vorthax's second son. His twitching had stopped 12 minutes ago. The others had watched, frozen in a silence that felt almost reverent, though it was really just terror disguised as etiquette. She paused halfway to the dais. The nobles had been removed, extracted, disarmed, sedated. What remained now was the royal family, the pure bloodline. 10 beings, each sculpted by war, conquest, and inbreeding. They had never once considered themselves vulnerable. Until now. Claire's hands remained behind her back, her posture unshaken despite the red stain down her blouse. She hadn't changed since the banquet, hadn't touched a weapon, hadn't raised her voice. The king's youngest daughter, barely of age in alien years, began to sob. You came alone, said Vorthax from his throne. His voice had lost its grandeur. It sounded hoarse, caught in a throat not used to doubt. Claire tilted her head. Did I? The silence that followed was thick, measured, deliberate. Behind the throne, one of the massive crystal display windows cracked from corner to corner. The king flinched. The queen consort shifted her weight. Claire noticed the slight favoring of her right side. Bruised ribs. She had tried to run when the first seal broke. I gave you 2 hours, Claire said gently. No one can accuse Earth of being rash. You've murdered royal blood, the queen hissed. You've desecrated the covenant. Claire walked another 3 steps forward. Her eyes swept across the 10 survivors. I haven't murdered anyone, she said. Not yet. The prince with the shoulder burn staggered upright. You came here as a diplomat. I came here to test restraint, she replied. You failed. She stopped at the base of the stairs leading up to the throne. Her expression was unreadable, her voice even. Earth offered peace, tolerance, trade. Your empire offered laughter and a kick to the face. You expect respect, the queen barked. From us? From a planet of storytellers and stone throwers. Claire took out a folded slip of paper from her jacket. It was handwritten, ink on human parchment. She read from it without flourish. Clause 1. No act of aggression, direct or indirect, shall be delivered upon an Earth representative, or the responsible party shall be considered in breach of interspecies accord, and open to unmoderated retaliation. She folded the paper and returned it to her pocket. That was signed by 27 planetary rulers and submitted for your review. Your people mocked it. We didn't think you were serious, muttered the eldest daughter. Her golden eyes darted to the side, toward the emergency portal behind the throne. It was still locked. Nothing had overridden it. We weren't, Claire said, until the moment your father's boot struck my chest. The king rose, the tips of his claws twitching. I regret nothing, he growled. I didn't ask for regret, she replied. I came for your bloodline. You arrogant. Claire raised a hand. Just one. It wasn't a gesture of power, but of timing. Behind her, the massive doors groaned open again. The three humans from the lift entered. One held a single item, a cube-shaped device etched with orbiting sigils. The others flanked Claire, silent. The queen stepped forward, trembling. You would destroy our lineage for an insult? Claire turned toward her, finally letting emotion breach her voice. You didn't insult me, she said. You assaulted Earth. Our patience. Our dignity. Our belief that we might coexist. She reached into her jacket and pulled out a small, circular device. She placed it gently on the carpet. A soft beep echoed, and a blue dome expanded around them, sealing the 10 royals, Claire, and her team inside a privacy barrier. No signals in or out. No interference. The final conversation. Vorthax stepped down from the throne. Each footfall was a threat. He was taller than Claire by 4 feet, his shadow wide, his presence enormous. I could kill you where you stand. You could try. He bared his teeth, but didn't move. Something in her eyes held him back. Not fury, not fear. Something colder, older. A memory of a predator his ancestors had long since erased from their myths. A species that didn't announce war. A species that simply ended it. Claire spoke softly. You think humans weak because we bleed. But you never asked what we do with pain. She stepped aside and nodded. The man with the cube activated it. It hovered upward and projected 10 beams of light, each locking onto one of the royals. They screamed. Not in pain, but in violation. Ancestral bindings, genetic seals, the innermost roots of their code, ripped free, exposed and shattered. Claire spoke over the noise. Earth has no interest in ruling your empire. We're not here to conquer. We're here to ensure you never touch our children again. The queen collapsed to her knees, blood streaming from her ears. Please, she whispered. Mercy. Claire's face twitched, once. We offered that, she said. With tea. One of the princes charged. Screaming. Unarmed. Desperate. Claire sidestepped, grabbed his arm mid-swing, and pressed her fingers to his wrist. He dropped. Not dead. Just undone. Everything in him that made him royal, disconnected. She stepped back. Let the others watch. You taught the galaxy that strength is spectacle, she said. That to rule is to punish. That to be feared is to survive. Earth disagrees. The beams faded. One by one, the royals collapsed, gasping. No wounds. No fire. Just silence. Claire nodded to her team. The barrier dropped. And she turned to go. But stopped. The king, still standing, looked smaller now. Not in size. In presence. I will rebuild, he rasped. You cannot erase what we are. Claire looked over her shoulder. You're not being erased, she said. You're being replaced. He growled. By who? Claire stepped through the threshold, paused at the doorway, and said, by those who remember what kindness costs, and what it's worth. Behind her, the palace began to shift. Systems rerouting. Defense satellites aligning. Earth's final clause being executed. Sovereignty suspended, empire quarantined. The throne flickered, and the royal carpet, once red with honor, was now red with its own lineage. Claire walked down the great hall alone, boots echoing softly, history rewriting itself in each step.